Hello, come on in, come on in. I'm Eric Westhoff, I'm the Executive Director of Canary Media, and we are overjoyed to be here, and we're overjoyed to have you here. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? You want me to play the harmonica? More harmonica? Say what? No, don't do that yet. Just some quick, some housekeeping. This place is crawling with reporters. And for the next 3 hours or so, everything's off the record, and you don't have to worry about what you're saying unless otherwise arranged. Okay? So that's important. We've had people get a little tight when they talk to reporters. So yes, I'm Eric Westhoff, and
I'm Wendy Bechtold, Canary Media's managing editor. We are overjoyed to be here tonight in the company of 400 people that we respect and cherish. You all could have stayed home, just, watching the Real Housewives of Oakland and Berkeley and, polishing off a pint of ice cream and just staring into the middle distance in quiet despair. But instead, you came here. You showed up for community and to support climate change media. And advocacy in a new era of policy adversity. So, welcome.
Welcome. It's in this community that we'll find solace and the passion to keep our fight going and to wake up tomorrow morning working as hard as we were 2 weeks ago, 2 years ago, whatever, and coming back to work recharged and rejuvenated. And on that topic, Wendy spent the last week. Wendy spent a couple of days in the high Utah desert running mini marathons, sleeping rough, and eating bugs.
We all have our ways of coping, Eric. It was more like glamping, for the record, and bug eating was optional. But yes, we all maybe need a bit of a mental reset before we resume our work. So, Eric, will you tell us something that an old wise person might say, if you've ever met one?
Yes, I will. It's certainly what an old person would say. I, along with a number of reporters at Canary Media, have been reporting on the climate problem and the energy transition for 4 or 5 presidential terms, from George W. Bush's the Great Recession, through Obama's ARRA, through Trump's first term, which had the DOE Secretary Rick Perry, and Biden's term. And if you looked at solar growth over the last 4 or 5 presidential terms, storage growth, wind growth, other sectors, you would see a 30% compound annual growth rate, and you wouldn't be able, yes, hooray, solar.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't, but here's the point, you would not be able to detect who was in the Oval Office at the time. Solar progress, storage progress, wind progress has been state level, local level, community level action, and that's the way it's going to be in the coming years. I think I'm off script.
Should we get on with the show?
Yes.
Or do you have other wise words?
No, that's about the last of the wisdom. So you're going to introduce the panel?
I am, yes. So our first awesome panel emphasizes the importance of local elections. So Canary ally and editor-at-large and Volts journalist David Roberts is here. He'll be speaking with Carolyn Spears of Climate Cabinet. The two will talk over what happened last week. Climate Cabinet takes a Moneyball approach to backing climate-based candidates. They'll be talking about election successes at the state and local level, which will be like a breath of fresh air for all of us, I'm sure.
All right, and before that panel comes up, we're going to bring Kristen Kirsch up to the stage in a minute. She's one of our sponsors tonight. Next Tracker is a sponsor. Harrington Investments, MCE, Moyer Strategies, and Advanced Energy United are the great sponsors who made this event possible, so thank you to them. We are a non-profit, and we depend on the contributions of our allies to keep us going. So, Kristen's going to come up and say a few words. She's the Senior VP of Global Marketing at Nextracker. I assume a lot of you are familiar with Nextracker. They make the trackers that make utility-scale solar work, and they were the largest IPO, one of the largest IPOs in 2023. They're global. They're in 40 countries. And Kristen is, if you know her, she's smart, energetic, engaging, and she understands that our battle involves storytelling and narrative, and that's why she's helping support Canary Media, and that's why she's great at what she does in the storytelling and narrative at Nextracker. So, Kristen.
All right. Hello. All right. Let's just start with the obvious. We're all licking our wounds. We're scratching our heads, wondering what's next after this last week's election. We're here as the choir, united in our belief in climate science, right? Raise your hand, climate naysayers. And committed to clean air, clean water, and, well, our future, right? But what happens now? Now, my friends, it's time to what I'm going to call community up. It's time to be bold. It's time to tell the stories that need telling and to channel our collective strength into action at every level. I'm Kristen Kirsch with Nextracker. For those of you who are not familiar with the company, we're a global leader in solar technology, powering utility-scale solar generation projects. Those are the large panel, the large kind of solar farms, as some may call them, and they have the large trackers, and they move these devices that go from the east to west, and we use a lot of intelligence to do that. And we also do a couple other things, like bringing lower carbon steel to market, which is super exciting for me. And we're also a little bit more than that, with over 100 gigawatts installed. That's about the output of 40 Hoover dams, just so you know. And our reach extends, like Eric was saying, over about 40 countries. So our team is deeply committed to driving clean energy policy. Our executive leadership is in every single possible policy organization throughout the markets that we serve. And it's not just, at the national level, it's at the local level, from Baku to the East Bay. But today, let's talk about what we can do locally. This is where the real power of community can shine. Where's Bernadette? Raise your hand. There she is. All right. So Bernadette is from the California, she represents this California Solar and Storage Association, CALSA, right here in California. And, she knows better than anyone how much we can accomplish right here in California to move favorable policy in Sacramento. As CALSA members, we at Nextracker are so grateful for your tireless work on behalf of the entire industry. So thank you. There's a tie-in. Community up, remember? Today's program, as was mentioned, kicks off with the first panel, Electing Clean Energy Champions, featuring David Roberts Volt's podcast and Caroline Spears of Climate Cabinet. They'll dive into what's possible when we build the right leadership around clean energy. We'll also hear from someone who can't help but be optimistic about our climate future, even if the headlines don't always make it easy. And then we'll cap it off with an expert panel of elected officials and climate journalists breaking down where California is going and how we can help drive that journey forward. Why is Nextracker sponsoring tonight? This is where we end, and we can get on with the show. Because Canary Media stands at the pinnacle of climate journalism, a nonprofit doing the work that needs to be done. The real warriors reporting on the climate story with depth and integrity. So let's take a moment to salute them, especially now when we need strong media voices than ever. Let's get on with the show.
Hello.
Hey, y'all.
We heard her describing someone who couldn't help but be optimistic, and both of us looked at each other like, that's not you.
that you?
That's not supposed to be me, is it? We can help it. So we're here to, I don't know if you guys heard, but there was an election last week, and we are here to discuss the results.
The bar is still open if folks are.
Yeah,
that right
and
now.
please tip your bartender. So the federal, the federal level was not great, not optimal, not maybe what we would have hoped. But of course, the whole thesis of climate cabinet is that these subnational races matter and shape policy for the future and shape our future leaders, shape the future bench, et cetera, et cetera. So we're here to talk about those races, not about a pedophile being put in charge of law enforcement or a Russian spy being put in charge of intelligence or a Fox News host being put in charge of the Department of Defense. So let's, sorry, it's on my mind. So Carolyn, let's talk about, I was going to say the good news. Let's talk about where there are glimmers of sunshine at the local level. You guys had this, you might want to explain sort of to everybody, kind of, you have this set of races you're watching and fighting for, and you have, I think, certain projections and expectations beforehand. And so I would like to start with just sort of like big picture of the races you're tracking. How close was the outcome to what you projected and expected? And then, from there, let's talk about some of the wins.
Great. Really excited to do that. All right. There was an election last Tuesday, and many of you followed the federal results. At Climate Cabinet, we are Moneyball for climate politics, so we did not do any federal races because our job is low cost, high impact. That's the space that we have in the ecosystem. And every year we go into the year and it's a portfolio approach. So on Tuesday, we had 172 climate champions up for election. And those were, so many fantastic running and tough races across the country that have really high climate impact for every single race. And every year...
You select by climate impact, right? Like that's sort of like your criteria for choosing races where someone can, not just like where it's winnable, but where someone can make a big difference on climate.
Exactly. So that would be the difference between doing you could invest in someone running for the New Hampshire state legislature, but there are 400 people in the New Hampshire state legislature, which is I'm sorry, if y'all are from New Hampshire, that's too many. It's just too many people.
That's like half the population of New Hampshire.
Yeah, it's like every fifth person gets to be in the state legislature. What are we doing here? It's wild. But in New Hampshire, again, has something close to 1% of the emissions of Texas. So the climate impact isn't fabulous. You take something like Pennsylvania, which is, if Pennsylvania were its own country, it would be the 40th largest emitter in the world. Much more impactful. So we look at the difference between those, and that's really what guides our investment thesis every year. It's like, I love all of our candidates every year because we're never, we don't support anyone you see on CNN. You're never going to turn on CNN and be like, wow, it's that person who's running for Pennsylvania House District 142. But that's the stuff that gets us really excited. And so we had 172 candidates up on Tuesday. Every year it's this portfolio approach, right? You go for 50% win rate every single year. On last Tuesday, we won 52% of our races. We did pretty well, yeah. Which is fantastic. We defended seats, we flipped seats, and like this last week has been strange because emotionally,
Oh, has it?
it's been a roller coaster, but professionally, we elect a lot of great people to office who are great on climate, and I'm really excited about what they'll do next year.
So let's talk about a couple of those examples. There's North Carolina.
Yeah.
It's odd to talk about happy North Carolina results, but tell us what happened there.
So I am happy about North Carolina. We elected Josh Stein to the governor's race. Yeah, really exciting. You know, a couple years ago, I'd have been like, of course he would have won. Look at the person he was running against, Mark Robinson. I don't know if y'all were tracking that race. Is it like appropriate to say Mark Robinson? We're at this point in politics where I'm like, is this a family-friendly audience? Can I say what Mark Robinson did?
Hard to even describe him in a way that's family-friendly.
But I'm not taking anything for granted. It is really exciting that Josh Stein won that governor's race. The important thing we had to do, is not just have him win that race. We need to give him a veto pen that works. Because what happened under Cooper is that we had a Democratic governor, and we had this GOP supermajority that was crazy on climate and would override his veto. So they passed this bill to strip energy efficiency and building codes that would have made houses like EV ready and solar ready. And they overrode his veto on that. So it's really important that we break that supermajority and give incoming Governor Josh Stein a working veto pen, and we did that. We broke the supermajority, so it's so exciting on climate.
By how many? What's our margin there on the?
We have a 1-seat margin. Woo! Really exciting. But some of those candidates, we had a candidate flip an R+4 district. Like some of these candidates ran uphill races. Yeah, and she did it after Hurricane Helene. This is Lindsay Prather running in the western side of the state. Hurricane Helene hit. We saw that polling showed that there was an increased interest in climate after a giant hurricane devastated Western North Carolina. Again, we are taking nothing for granted this year. Polling showed that voters cared about that, and Lindsay actually saw that on the doors. So they completely changed their campaign. They went from kind of a standard campaign to, hey, here's how we can help rebuild. And they talked about climate, they talked about clean energy, and they won. Again, she flipped an R+4 district through a fabulous strategy, so I'm really excited about that.
All right, and what about the future of North Carolina? To you, is like having a veto over the crazy legislature the best we can hope for in North Carolina?
So there's a short-term win, and there's a longer-term win in North Carolina. On the short-term win, I have lost my voice after this last week, y'all. The short-term win in North Carolina is that we have a working veto pen. The long term is that we have a path towards changing power in North Carolina. Right now, it's very gerrymandered state. So we're not only thinking about our 2024 races right now, we're also thinking about 2030 is the big year. 2030 is the year when we, oh my God, last week's been tough. Okay, I have cough drops in my pocket. We're ready to go. Okay, so 2030 is the big year when the whoever controls state legislatures in all of these states will actually redraw their own district boundaries and the district boundaries for Congress. So I think about every win that we had this year, and I am thinking about the wins that we'll get in the 2025 legislative cycle. We've just brought on a fabulous senior policy director to kind of run a multi-state lobbying operation to get clean energy progress at the states, which we'll need. I knew we'd need it, but now we need it more than ever after last Tuesday. So we're really thinking about 2024, but also how are we notching wins every single year and we have a map redrawing year. Basically 2030 how we do in state legislative races in 2030 will determine our climate progress through 2040. We can't have another 2010 to 2020 year, which was like a lost decade on climate.
Yeah.
And that's our opportunity window.
People might remember 2010 when
Exactly.
the Tea Party ran roughshod over Congress and then was responsible for gerrymandering and screwed Democrats for a decade with that. So it would not be good if that happened again.
Yeah.
Several states had ballot initiatives
Yeah.
about gerrymandering. You know, was saying like, let's do a nonpartisan, you know, sort of like objective panel put in charge of redistricting rather than Congress. And all three of those lost. Was
Yeah.
one of those in North Carolina, or am I?
There was one in Ohio. That was
Ohio, that's
yeah.
the heartbreaker.
I know.
Why, Ohio?
Are you asking for there to be like a logical reason about how people vote every year? Because I don't know if I can
This
give
is
that
what
to
I
you.
can't not do, and that's why I'm
I know.
tortured. All right.
But this is why, can I just do like a pivot into the information ecosystem?
Please.
This is why having a good information ecosystem, shout out to Canary Media, is important. Yeah. But seriously, because how people, one thing, so I spent all of last month in Pennsylvania knocking doors. And this happens to me every time I knock doors, which is we focus so much on first mile media, which is what the candidate says, and we're very obsessed. Like,
Right.
oh, they kind of said the wrong thing in this particular interview, what this means for, you know, the results or the results of the campaign. And we don't think as much about last mile media, which is what voters hear, what they process, and what they say back to you. And every single time I knock doors, what voters tell me that candidates are about is wildly different from what the candidates are saying themselves. And so fixing that last mile media is I think, our job and our goal for the next couple of years.
You're trying to trigger me. I'm not going to let us get onto that, or I'll never shut
What was the
up.
tweet that made you most angry today? We could really go down in this direction.
I know. I will just say that like so many of the postmortems are like, you know, Democrats did this, and the voters reacted this way. Why would they react this way to this? And I keep saying, like, in between this and them is a big information ecosystem that is absolutely polluting everything. So they just don't know. They literally don't know what they're doing. And if you eliminate that from your analysis, you're going to be like, well, I guess they hate it when we create a great economy, and we're not going to do that again. All right, anyway. Let's talk about Wisconsin. Wisconsin is, I guess, what passes for a bright spot.
Hey, it's an actual bright spot.
An
You
actual
can stand
bright
on that. There is a bright spot in Wisconsin on last Tuesday. That's absolutely true.
I mean, hopefully Ben Wickler is going to be the next DNC chair. So tell us what happened in Wisconsin, similar to the North Carolina results in some way.
Yeah, also broke the supermajority in Wisconsin, which is also very exciting. We did that because we got new maps. So Ben Wickler and the Wisconsin Dems ran a 10-year strategy, which was like, first, you got to get the governorship. Then you have to flip multiple state Supreme Court seats. And then you can file a lawsuit that will make it to the state Supreme Court that will redraw the maps and that are basically fair now. And they're basically fair maps that they don't really prioritize one party or the other, and then we have a shot. And they executed every single piece of
They actually did it. It was,
yeah. So watch this space in 2026. We made some great gains. And basically, once you get incumbency on one of these seats, it becomes so much easier to re-win election. So this was an uphill climb this year in the Wisconsin state legislature. But in 2026, 2028, our job just got a whole lot easier. And what's literally on the table, we have 100% clean energy on the table. We have clean cars on the table in Wisconsin. If we can flip just a few seats.
What are the margins in the House and Senate there? They're both Republicans still, right?
They're both Republicans still, but basically the maps are drawn favorably, and in a year where Trump isn't at the top of the ticket, people feel much more confident. Yeah. And just to I know it doesn't feel, I know it doesn't feel exciting to be like, we have new maps in Wisconsin, but Wisconsin has more emissions than the entire state of Norway by 2x. So these are, I think, these states are important on an international scale, and the things we do at these states matter. There's some folks here who I used to work with at Cypress Creek, and one of the best things I talk about is when we were at Cypress, we built over 60 projects in the state of Massachusetts, and none in the state of Arizona. and that's all state policy. So these states really matter for our ability to get things done. And it doesn't emotionally, like this is one of those weird weeks where I'm like not super happy about last Tuesday's results, but intellectually I'm like, well, we can still get some stuff done. That's great. And it is great, actually. And we'll just let that sink in and like keep working at this level.
Yeah. The only other happy spot was New Mexico. Tell us about New Mexico.
New Mexico, Dem trifecta. But this is a great case. Sometimes when you talk, Republicans, Democrats, a classic case of this stuff can be very nonpartisan because in New Mexico, we had Democrats who were voting against things like a community solar bill, which is like, come on. Like, community solar bill, there should be a non-starter. We've gotten that through bipartisan majorities before. I mean, you can't get it through a Dem trifecta. What's going on? So it's just clear that there's a lot of partisanship baked into how people view climate, but it's not always partisanship, and it's not always partisanship. In New Mexico, we got involved in the primaries earlier this year. We had 9 seats. We had an open seat, 4 defense, and 4 offense, where we had, again, folks voting against like really obvious climate stuff, and we knocked all 4 anti-climate people out of office earlier this year in New Mexico. Yeah, it was awesome. Yeah, expanded climate window of opportunity in the New Mexico State Legislature. We have lobbyists there. We're ready to go.
So you anticipate good things coming out of New Mexico in this coming?
I anticipate it with work, with lobbying. You got to show up in the Capitol and you have to say, this is what I want you to pass, this is how to get it done. But we are in a much stronger position than we were 6 months ago.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that concludes our good news for the event. Let's talk about some bad news. Woo! In the bad news column, which I would say I sort of expected, was pretty bad results in these PUC elections. So some states, I think like 5, have elected public utility commissions, the regulatory body that oversees the state's power utilities.
Obviously, something we should totally elect, and that the voters...
Something that voters are super educated on.
I feel that way when I'm looking through the ballot measures. I'm like, should I be voting on this?
I know.
What
America has
dialysis
too many.
machines? What
America has too many elected positions. That's a real problem. But in Arizona and Montana, bizarrely, they're elected, and so Montana had, I think, a 5-0 anti-climate PUC, and now still does.
Yep, no change.
Yes, and Arizona had a 4-1 anti-climate majority, and now has a 5-0 climate majority. So basically, no climate champions won in those races. Is that just because? I mean, are those all just drafting on bigger votes? Like, is any voter voting for a particular PUC commissioner, or is this just like reflects partisanship?
So in Montana, a state that Trump won by, I think we're at 15 or 20 points. When it's that level of margin, it's partisanship. Arizona, where the margins are a lot closer, is a place where we can make a lot of change. So the way I would think about, there's 2 things to think about for the Arizona Corporation Commission. The first is that we have to, running a statewide race in Arizona during a presidential and Senate year is expensive, and we have to put the money in like this is worth it. And it is worth it. Oh,
you mean just like trying to get your ads out in the midst of all the other ads?
Yeah, this is like, these are expensive races, and we need to be spending like they are. And we underspent by about 66% this year. Yeah, our budget should have been 3x what it was. And we all, like, this was a known going in, and it's just a flag for us going forward. What we also need to do is be running people for these races that have held elected office before, and so there's a recruitment piece to that, too, that we can solve next time.
Who underspent? You mean climate cabinet underspent on it, or just?
The whole field.
the whole
Yeah.
field.
Oh, we tried raising for it. It was really hard. Yeah.
Yeah.
We had the budget in mind, but you can go to people and say, hey, this is how much it's going to cost. And like, they either say yes or they say no.
I know, and
Yeah,
trying to convince
stuff.
people that PUCs are important is
Wonky.
yeah. Hopefully, if you are Volts listeners, which you should be, you will know that there's an organization now called Power Lines that's out there very much trying to sort of, thank you, trying to, I mean, I don't know why I'm saying thank you. It's not my organization, but I'm a big fan, a proponent that's trying to sort of raise the profile of PUCs generally, trying to draw attention to the races where there are elected PUCs, trying to get people with money to pay attention to those things. So hopefully that will get easier.
And that's a big problem. In these PUC elections, we basically see from 2 to 6% down ballot drop off, where people are voting for the top of the ticket. They're voting sometimes for their Congress member. They're just leaving this whole section of the ballot blank because everybody's like, what is the Arizona Corporation Commission? It doesn't commission, the title doesn't say what it actually does, like everything about it. And so you actually have really bad down ballot drop off in the bluest cities in Arizona. It's 2% in kind of the suburbs, it's 6% down ballot drop off in the cities. So that's what I'm saying. Arizona, there's a clear path forward. We have to treat these races like they matter. And the other thing is, the other reason these races are so expensive, in addition to having to get your name ID up in a very competitive, can you imagine like trying to like find an ad vendor in 2024 if you're a political campaign? I mean, wild. We have to be funding these races early. We have to give them the money they need. And the other piece of this is, it's like, well, who's funding the opposition? And the fun thing about these public service commissions is they regulate utilities. Utilities can go to all of their customers, collect rates from them every month, and then use those rates to fund the elections for the public service commissioners that will give them the best deal. It's wild.
Guess who is paying attention to PUC races?
And so there's actually state legislation we can, that Climate Cabinet's looking at, introducing, running, and building votes for over the next couple years, that says you can't use utility rates for political contributions.
Has passed in a couple of
It's passed in a few states.
Yeah, 2 or 3 states have passed that.
it's good.
And that's one of the things that, somewhat surprisingly to me, like the pod I did on that with Dave Pomerantz about those laws was bizarrely popular. I think that does actually resonate with the public a little bit. Like, and why wouldn't it? Like, they're taking your rate money to
Do
lobby
politics?
against your interests. It's
Crazy.
It's pretty outrageous.
Yeah.
Insurance is an interesting topic these days, particularly interesting in a couple of key states like North Carolina, where all of a sudden, whether your home is safe looks a lot different now than it did a couple of years ago. So you might think it would be good to elect an insurance commissioner who was aware of the problem. But that didn't happen. What happened there?
Thanks for that lead-in.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, and the thing I'll say about all of these, we talk about these offices like they're set in stone. We talk about the insurance commissioner like they are the only one who can regulate insurance or public service. They are the only one. But what we see in all of these races, and when it comes to the governor, the executive agencies, the state legislatures, the cities, the counties, is there's actually a constant power grab going on between all of those levels of government. It's not a layer cake, it's a marble cake. And it's a marble cake with intention. Like when Dallas tried to move to electric leaf blowers, the Texas state legislature was like, no. And they tried to pass a bill. It's called the Death Star bill. You can look it up, very dramatic.
They called it the Death Star bill?
I think it got named that by the press. To try to strip away cities' ability to do things on a lot of issues, but also on climate. And so there's this constant power struggle. So we will see a lot of insurance legislation come up at the state legislatures in North Carolina, because while we're electing obscure regulators for the electricity grid, why not also elect obscure regulators to do insurance? There's a lot of states that elect their insurance commissioner as well. North Carolina is one of them. We supported Natasha Marcus, who's running, and unfortunately, we won the governor's seat there, we won the attorney general, we won a bunch of statewides. She didn't, and she lost the insurance commissioner race to a guy who doesn't believe in climate change. who will be setting the insurance rates for North Carolina.
I don't know
next-
why I'm
yeah.
laughing. Well, enough about that. What about Michigan? Michigan seems particularly sad to me since we had a majority there, and they were quite good on. They they got like a 1-seat majority and like instantly passed a 100% clean energy bill. That's gone now. Tell us how you think about Michigan, not just what happened, but like going forward.
So we still have 100% clean in Michigan. Still there, still on the books. It's not going away because we still have the Senate. It wasn't up this year. Helped us. Nice. And we have the governor as well. We lost the House.
By 1 seat,
A couple
2?
seats. Got a handful of seats gone in the House. There's 100 seats though, so we'll come back. 2026, y'all. Midterms tend to be like historically have been bad years for the incumbent president's party, and I don't know. Maybe this new round of cabinet picks by Trump will engender the love and appreciation of the American people. But I think in 2026 we might have a good map for us at the
The
state
people
legislature.
have been waiting for Tulsi Gabbard.
They have been waiting for Vivek Ramaswamy, specifically.
But Grand
yeah.
Rapids,
Yeah, we have a good story in Grand Rapids. We elected climate champion David LeGrand to Grand Rapids. Y'all, some of these people, like, we elect people who are important in their own right. That's very important to us. Like, they have to be pushing for, he wants to make Grand Rapids a 100% clean electricity city, for example. That's really exciting to us. But also, some of these candidates, David LeGrand's campaign knocked 65,000 doors in the state of Michigan, in a battleground county that ends up running up the margins for Slotkin, who won that race in the Senate. The Michigan 3rd District, another competitive district, ran up the numbers there. Really impressive story, and I'm excited for Grand Rapids to keep pushing forward on 100% clean.
let's talk about Pennsylvania. Sort of Pennsylvania's sort of funny. Like the entire country, the entire world was focused on Pennsylvania.
Yes.
You know, I did a pod with a House rep there who was going through all the races in the history, and it is like on the razor's edge, not just statewide, but almost every race, like every single special election they've had, both houses of Congress, everything is like, exactly. I mean, very tense just talking to her. And so all this attention, all this money, including a big push from you guys,
Yep.
and to a first approximation, the result was nothing. No change. Everything in Pennsylvania remains exactly as knife edge as it was before the election. What the hell? I don't know what there is to say about that, but
like going into Tuesday, Tuesday, I think the initial narrative, because the narrative of losing the presidency is to a guy with 34 felony counts is bad. But what we saw in a lot of our races is no change, slightly better. We lost a chamber in Michigan. We're now tied in Minnesota House instead of majority. And Pennsylvania is one of those stories. Like, if you guys had told me the presidential result and the Senate result in Pennsylvania, you would not have also told me, before going into the election, Dems had a 102-101 majority in the House. And after the election, they have a 102-101 majority in the House. They also picked up a seat in a flip district in the Senate. Dems flipped a seat in the Senate in Pennsylvania this year. They lost a seat that should have been safe for Dems, but is a prime pickup for the next cycle. But yeah, no change in Pennsylvania. Wild. But
do you think it's just like, literally there was just like, everybody just canceled each other out? Like there was so much effort, it literally was like mathematically identical and canceled itself out?
This is like one of
Or
those.
does nothing matter? Which is my alternate theory.
Answering the first comment, but not the second comment. Okay. the unsatisfying political answer to like every result from Tuesday is that exit polls are all garbage and we all have to wait like 5 months to actually figure out what happened. So
we
when
don't
people
have
are
to
like,
wait. Nobody's waiting, but we should wait. Let's just say.
there's just a lot of takes out there, and what we're gonna do is we're gonna go through the voter file of the people who actually voted. There's like a whole statistically proper way to go about this, where you know, contact them, you figure out how they voted, you track that with their precinct results, you kind of, the math needs to math, and then you're like, all right, this group of people voted like this, and these people shifted this way. But a lot of the takes right now are pretty unsubstantiated when it comes to like how groups of voters voted. What we do know at this point is that we had candidates outrun the top of the ticket. Like this, a lot of times, I talk to folks, they're like, oh, well, you know, all those state legislature races are just coattails of the national,
yeah.
and all you have to do is fund the national. That is not true. It's never been true. In 2020, we had ticket splitting at the state legislature level in Pennsylvania by 15 points in all of the battleground counties. That's someone who, literally, those counties, tickets, they split their ticket by 15 points, voting for either Biden and the Republican state lawmaker or Trump and the Democratic state lawmaker. 15 points of difference, that makes majorities. That's some of what we saw on Tuesday in Pennsylvania. And it just follows the pattern of what we've seen in Pennsylvania in 2020 as well, which is, instead of coattails, it was like every candidate had to run their own race. They had to stand up on their own 2 feet. They had to get their name ID out in their community. Patty Kim, who won that Senate seat in Harrisburg, was a local TV anchor. You know, you run candidates who are strong, who have great name ID, you have good candidate recruitment, and that's what a great campaign looks like. And that's what we saw in Pennsylvania. So that's how we got there.
Apparently there was well, one thing I just want to emphasize that Caroline said, just in case everybody isn't aware, I assume this is sort of like a politically aware crowd more than most, but just like all the takes you're seeing are based on exit polls about, you know, this demographic swinging towards Trump and this demographic swinging away. They're all based on exit polls, which are notoriously wrong. So this happens every election. Like you get a bunch of takes that harden into conventional wisdom,
Yes.
and then the actual data comes out, contradicts all of it, and it doesn't matter. Conventional wisdom never dies. Narratives never die in the media.
Is this upsetting to you?
No,
How do you really
about
feel?
it. I feel great about it. Yeah, so everybody just needs to like suspend judgment for a little while about, you know, like the Latino shift to Trump. People are drawing cosmic frickin' conclusions from that, and we don't even know if it's real yet, or how real it is, or whether it's big or small. Like we don't really know anything about that, so it's hard. Everybody, there's such a appetite for takes right now that like somebody's gonna satisfy the appetite, but like almost everything is BS at this stage. Minnesota seems a little sad to me too. They had a I mean, God bless Tim Walz. Like they had a razor thin majority in 2022, and they just went for it. Absolutely went nuts. Like passed all kinds of great stuff. Absolutely should have been a model for Democrats everywhere across the country. And now can no longer do that. What happened there?
So we still have the Senate, we still have the governor, we are tied in the House, and we have a really strong leader in the Speaker of the House there. So we're in, just to say that like a lot of these candidates really ran ahead. It's very rare for so many state leg candidates to run out of the top of the ticket. It's building off of some of the stuff that we saw in 2022. But in Minnesota, they had an experience 10 years ago where they won a trifecta. Over 10 years ago, they won a trifecta. They said, it's really important to us that we're like cautious. No one wants to, so we don't seem like we're overreaching. They lost that trifecta the next 2 years. It didn't work. And so this time they went in with a strong plan. They said, we're going to deliver for people. And I think you're seeing a better result than the previous one. And they're in a stronger spot. Like all of the House, all up in 26. So we'll see everyone back in 2026. Don't you love the timestamp on these? It's just like it's constant.
I know, relentless.
I've had Virginia candidates running in 2025 reaching out to us all year. So it's constant, but this is like the engine. This is the political engine, and like this, we just need this constant attention on all of these levers of power. Because if we take our eye off the ball for a cycle, it's really hard to come back because of that incumbency advantage. So yeah.
So any other local results? Any other results you want to highlight or call out? Anything else?
Yeah, we have we got a pro-climate majority in Lancaster County, Nebraska. It's very exciting.
Nebraska?
Mm-hmm. Woo! Got a county, important for siting.
Right.
So that's good. And they control air permits for one of the largest coal power plants in the country. We've been like this all week.
What about
something about last Tuesday didn't inspire health in
yes, I haven't
7
been
days.
healthy since either.
Right.
What about looking forward? I guess it's like when most people think of that, they think of the next presidential race, but obviously, like, you guys are on races next year, and then 2026. It's, as you say, never stops. Are there local races or state races of particular significance that you're watching for 2026? And do you already have, like, your eyes on candidates? Like, how far ahead do you get, or is it just frantically racing to keep up?
Yeah, can you filibuster for 45 seconds while I get over this, like, whatever's happening?
Sure,
Cool.
sure. Just say the words information environment again, and I'll be unable to help myself. Yeah, I'll just say one thing. I'll just throw one factoid out there while Caroline's voice recovers. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on this too. So one of the interesting results from Tuesday was there was a shift toward Trump in every state, everywhere, among every demographic, except for women over 65, oddly. Of course, this is like, again...
Are you quoting exit polls?
Again, this is exit poll stuff, so all of this, so this is all sort of approximations, but I mean, the nationwide shift toward Trump was notable, and I think is not gonna, and is gonna hold up. The shift toward Trump nationwide was like, whatever, like 5 points, 5 to 7 points. And in the battleground states where Kamala campaigned, it was 3 to 5 points, basically. So I would just ask you, like, what force applies to the entire country and every demographic? It's not some clever political strategy, it's the information environment. That is the water in which we are all swimming. And another thing that was notable, a weirdly high number of voters this year voted for Trump and then just didn't fill out the rest of the ballot at all, which explains some of the diversion of these local races from national results. So there's clearly something specific about Trump, not the Republican Party. Do you know what I mean? Like, not specifically about Trump. And I don't know what that alchemy is, but obviously a huge part of it is the information environment, and we all need to think about how that happened and why.
One story about that from Pennsylvania, when I was on the doors talking to, it's like you do a packet, it's 50 doors. I talked to about 10 people a packet. You do 5 people who were like, yeah, we're totally on your side and we absolutely have a plan to vote, see you, and we just like kind of do finger guns at each other and walk to the next house. Then there'd be 3 people who were like, oh yeah, there's an election. What's my polling place? And you kind of do plan to vote, right? And then 2 people every packet who were like, I don't know who I'm going to vote for. And one thing about when I say like the doors are what makes me really believe that this information environment place is something we all have to focus on is, I remember I talked to one of those folks I was like, what's an issue that's on your mind? It's like, I'm just worried that they're teaching all this stuff in the schools and like my kids are gonna like be trans. And I was like,
Come home a different
dude.
gender. You turn your back and
All of a sudden, like,
my boy's a girl.
it's just like this fear-based stuff. Andy Bashir has a great column out today about how he actually supported gay kids and still won governor of Kentucky. So that's it. That was a good
Yeah, it's
story.
worth reading that statement from
I like
Bashir.
that.
It's very striking, very strikingly different from.
Yeah. And I talked to him about hearing aids. I was like, cool. Well, you know, one of the reasons that I'm on the doors here is that I care a lot that hearing aids are cheaper. My grandmother needs hearing aids. She lost them mowing the lawn. And she didn't buy another pair because they're $5,000. And so when Joe Biden lowered the cost of hearing aids, I texted them, and I didn't tell them that it was Joe Biden because my primary goal was getting her hearing aids, and my whole family's kind of right-wing, like extremely right-wing, like a signed photo of Rush Limbaugh in the living room level. Yeah, extremely fun. So I was like, just for some crazy reason, you can go to
Something
Walmart
happened.
and buy hearing aids now, and they're like a couple $100s. And it's exciting now because now she has hearing aids, and and I talked to this guy, and he was like, oh, 2 people in my family are hard of hearing. And that's an issue that really matters to me. And I was like, yeah, all right. Well, then, do we have your vote in the election?
Do I have a story for you?
Yeah, I mean, we walked through it, but it's just like we can do real things to improve people's lives. And that's still important. It needs to be a centerpiece of our strategy, and people need to hear about it. And so how are we going to fix that piece of it? What were we going to talk about before we got here, though? We're somewhere else.
Well, I was going to ask you what you're focusing on for next round. If there are particular states or races or.
So I love the podcast you did with Leanne Kruger because she talked about this 102, 101 majority in the Pennsylvania House that's like knife's edge every single time. We are building, at Climate Cabinet, we are building a special election defense fund because the tough things about these special elections just happen super fast. You basically need pooled capital ready to just deploy every single
Maybe
time a
just tell people,
majority
like,
is at
what
stake.
is up with special elections? Why are there so many in Pennsylvania? What prompts them? Like, what is it? Just when like someone in the Congress State House retires?
Retires, they get pulled in, like Trump right now is pulling people out of Congress into whatever. And so all this stuff happens. Someone decides to run for mayor, like
Right.
we almost imperiled the Michigan House majority over 2 people left to go run for mayor, crazy, and so they'll call a special. And in states, these can range from the special, surprise, there's a special election that's happening in 4.5 weeks to something a bit longer. Yeah, and so that's something we're doing to make sure that, you know, we talked about how the North Carolina supermajority, that's 1 seat. Pennsylvania, 102, 101. If a Pennsylvania state Senate seat opens, I'm very interested in that. We got 3 more seats to flip, let's go. So that's something that we're building at Climate Cabinet. So even in the interim of the next 2 years, we'll have opportunities to make plans. Then it's building in 2025, we are building I mentioned this, lobby network. We have to fight back against Trump. We're doing it at the states. So we're continuing to push climate progress at a state level, being in the Capitol, in the building, making sure that we turn the 80 people who did win election on Tuesday are now climate champions. Let's get them a plan. Let's go.
So you're pushing legislation. You're
Oh, yeah.
lobbying for legislation now.
Yeah,
Is that a new thing for you?
We've been doing it for 18 months. But we've kind of kept it on the, you know, everyone's been a little focused on the 2024 election. So we wanted to keep our focus, but now with bringing Dave Weisskopf on board, who's from Next Gen Climate,
Yeah, Dave.
Woo! Yes, we have a Dave fan in the house. He's great. He was a climate policy advisor to Tom Steyer. He's worked with state legislatures and governors across the country. So he's going to lead this program for us. I'm really excited about it. But yeah, making progress in the meantime. And then, our data science team's really good. It doesn't take us that long to figure out where we should target next. So for this year, we had our targets 18 months ago. We're like, all right, now we just got to raise the funds, deploy the funds, let's go, let's hit it. Our data science team basically can tell you which elections are going to be contested 18 months before the election happens. And so we're able to kind of precision target districts across the country. And we'll do that again for 26.
Let me ask you kind of a somewhat charged question. You guys are very data focused, very strategic, very surgical. What do you make of the larger Democratic Party's election apparatus? Everybody, everybody's a critic. Everybody's got their thing that Dems did wrong. Many of which are contradictory. Like they can't have done both things wrong. Kamala was both too centrist, clinging to Liz Cheney, and also too woke because she didn't disavow, trans whatever. So everybody seems to be drawing the conclusion that they were right all along about everything they had said before the election, which does not bespeak, let's say, a data-focused approach. So what do you make of the larger Democratic Party right now?
Well, I think a lot of those takes rest on the information issue that we talked about before. It's like Kamala said this instead of this, or this candidate said this instead of this. But if you go talk to voters, especially undecided voters, what they tell you they hear is so different from what the candidates are saying, both in substance and in volume. So if Kamala spends 95 minutes talking about the economy, but the one clip goes viral on TikTok, that's the conversation you have at the door. You have the conversation about the one clip that went viral on TikTok. And you can sit there and say that's not fair, but that's not fair. It doesn't get you to results. So this is something that I'm thinking about a lot and bringing together folks in my network who really study that information economy. And I'm looking forward with our team to actually stress testing that, actually being on the doors talking to voters to say how much of our candidates' message is showing up on the doors. I think it's really interesting. And then in the vein of everybody's take about the election was, see, the thing that I care about was the right thing all along. It is important. It is important that we take state legislatures seriously. In 2020, which was the last redistricting year, again, a year in which these state legislators get to draw their own districts, they choose their voters, and then they get to redraw the districts of all the members of Congress. Total gerrymandering. 2020, it was the year to do state legislatures, and this is actually what really inspired us to start a PAC and to start working on this. The RLCC, which is the Republican arm that does state legislatures, entered the year with 5 times the cash on hand of the DLCC. Yep, and that was the year. 2022 was also great, important. 2018 was also important. There's only one year in which they redraw the maps. That happens every decade. So one thing I'm obsessed with right now is thinking about 2030, looking at all of our top emitting states on climate in 2030. How do we have a pathway to 2030 and beyond? And by the way, I know we've done a lot of Republican, Democrat. It is just demonstrably true that Democrats are way better on our issue. If you're looking at value above replacement, if those are kind of your two options, you're picking, it's important that we actually look at someone's voting record, but we got to look at people's voting record, but that's just generally kind of a truism at the moment. But it's important that we have tools at our disposal. At Climate Cabinet, we use a lot of data science to constantly be looking for, are there Republicans out there who are taking tough votes, who are good on our issue, or again, value above replacement, better than the alternative. And we funded those folks like that this year, and we're keeping kind of this, we're basically always having our sensing network out there, and we always have to keep the door open for Republicans who want to be good on this issue too.
Would you or have you officially supported state level Republican?
We have this year there was a Arizona primary where we funded a Republican who was running against a woman who calls herself Trump in heels. That was fun.
What a terrible mental image.
I know. If you have a Chat GPT subscription, you can just throw that one in there, see what it gives you. Yeah, and he, like, not our greatest vote on climate, like 30% climate score. It's 0 to 100, 30%. Dems are 80 and above. Republicans are usually 20 and below. So if you're above 20 and a Republican, we're like, oh, what's going on with them? Do we need to talk to them? So when he tried to primary her this year, unsuccessful, but only unsuccessful by a few points, and that's something I want to keep looking at. And he took some tough votes. Again, it's like votes, not vibes. I don't care what someone puts on Twitter. How did you actually vote? What's your voting record? We're scoring it on our scale. And he, one of the leverage points we really have in this next year, this is optimism, is we have governors who are pro-climate who can use the power of the budget negotiation process to get good things done on climate, which is really exciting. And one of the examples of this is that in Arizona, the Republicans held the budget negotiation. They were going to refund the entire Department of Transportation. The Republicans in the Arizona State Ledge held that negotiation hostage because they were going to count greenhouse gas emissions at all. Like, they were just going to count them. They were like, inconceivable. We couldn't possibly fund a Department of Transportation. This Republican crossed party lines and was like, yeah, you should just fund the Department of Transportation. This is ridiculous. Do the greenhouse gas accounting exercise, it's fine. So when he did a primary, we supported him. And we're always kind of looking for folks like that. But I don't want to, like, it's dogmatic to, like, we have to be based on the data, and our goal is to solve climate change, not to solve for, our goal is to solve for climate change. That's what we're doing. We're solving for climate, we're solving for the clean energy economy. And that's what we're always doing at every one of these calculations. And so I think sometimes we get a lot of questions like, can you support more Republicans? And I'm like, yes, give me more who have demonstrably voted to solve climate change, and I will be happy to support them. And like, they're kind of few and far between, but they do exist.
Let me ask you, there's a sense, I feel like, among people following the national race, or sort of among national Dems, I don't think say this a lot in public, but there's this sense of sort of futility, like everything has become so nationalized. I mean, this gets back to the information environment, that everything has become so nationalized. Everybody's sort of swimming in the same stew of stuff that may or may not even be relevant to their, it used to be sort of conventional wisdom, almost dogma, that sort of like local issues trump these national issues, that people's material interests, in some sense, are primary. But Dems, I think Biden's whole theory of the case, Dems' whole theory of the case these past 4 years, deliverism, as it's called, is maybe we've lost control of the information environment, but if we deliver concrete benefits to people, that will cut through. That will, in a sense, occlude the rest of the noise. And so Biden sparked a manufacturing renaissance in the hollowed out parts of the country. There's factories being built all over the place. There's jobs popping up. There's whole economies and towns being revived. There's the hearing aid stuff. There's, like, go down the line. Like, there's all sorts of like middle and lower level stuff that people never even took note of. But like, it seems like, to the extent they could, Democrats delivered, to the extent they had power, and it did not seem to matter at all. It did not seem to, like, specifically unions, like, he voted, marched on cross-union lines, supported unions, protected their pensions, et cetera, and they shifted toward Trump this year. So as someone who's in local elections, on the ground in states, who's playing in this field, like, is that your sense that, like, the grain of local differences matters less and less, that in a sense, like, local issues matter less and less, or do you think that's overblown?
it is true that when you have a candidate who runs a really good local campaign, they overperform. But they don't overperform the fundamentals of their district by, like, you would want, you'd want to say, oh, we delivered all these things in Ohio, now we're going to magically win Ohio. But we lost Ohio by like 10 points last time. You don't overperform significantly from the fundamentals of your district, but you can overperform somewhat. And we saw that with Lindsey Prather in North Carolina. We saw that with races across the country. What I will say is, yes, it is true that the economic gains of the Biden administration were not realized by the majority of people who showed up on Tuesday. And there's a world in which we kind of sit in that and are like, wow, we did all these things and it didn't matter. But like, kind of our job, like, everyone here works on climate change. Like, our job is to kind of look at what is an impossible task and be like, okay, this is huge, it seems enormous, it doesn't seem like I have agency, I'm gonna find a pathway through. And like, that's what brings people into climate, I think. And like, that same approach is what we need to bring into politics as well. And like, I'm not disagreeing with you that this wasn't a good election, but like, we've talked.
Pretty sure I have the better of that argument.
Yeah, but like, we've talked about okay, if true, what do we do based on that? And how much kind of excavation do we need to do on that if true statement? And then how much do we need to build on the gaps in that statement, whether it's information economy or above? And like, that is literally our job, is to take what seems like a really big task that involves not every single one of us in this room, but like millions of people across the country, and to actually make it happen. And we have strategies for that, and we have proof points of that. And if we don't have strategies, we can do hypothesis testing, and we can test those strategies over time. And like, we have to. Like, there's no, like, we have to work on climate change. We have to make our democracy work, and we will find a pathway through. And like, that's what we gotta do. That's what we're all here for. I'm not trying to be Pollyanna about it. Like, we all know, like, like, no one had a really fun last 7 days who was like hoping that Harris would win. But we did have real people who won on Tuesday, and they show us the future. And I don't know, none of us started in climate because we're like, this will be easy, and I'll retire, and it'll be great. Yeah, we could have all worked at like Snapchat with our lives, and we didn't. We're here, and like, this is kind of the road we picked, and I'm happy to be here. It feels like a good thing to do with my life.
All right.
I don't know.
Well, we'll wrap it up there. Thanks, everyone.